Live from Alexa or some proximity thereof. I think we have to do the offering now, but our head usher is at Grandma's house. No, you can't just put it in there like that. It's not how offering works.
It's for you. You're the first one.
It's not for me. Like, all right, go ahead and pray for the offering.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and thank you for this time to assemble today in a world that we need you more and more. I pray that you look upon those that desire your company, desire your Son, Jesus Christ. I pray that we can spread the word. As hard as we may think it is today, it's just as hard as it's always been you. I just thank you, God, for your Son, for your salvation. I pray for the message today. I pray that you hear Bob and give him the word to speak to him. Put out in Jesus' name, I pray.
So this thing's not cooperating with me. Put it here. There. All right. So someday when we have a real song service, there'll be someone doing a special that won't be me. So Joel. Whew. What do you get out of the book of Joel? So there's something in every book. It's just finding it or being smart enough to find it. And as I was reading the book to prepare for last Wednesday night, like I usually do, I was looking for something to talk about today. I'm like, because that's all I'm thinking about is what am I going to do on Sunday? I'm like around Monday evening, I'm pretty much ready for Wednesday. And I start to think, oh gosh, what am I going to do on Sunday? So that's how I read the Bible now. I was like, what am I going to do on Wednesday? What am I going to do on Sunday? And like usual, God's, how about this? I'm like, it just happens every time. There's a phrase that stuck out in my head when I was reading the book. That's just, you're wondering how these things come up. I have no grand plan. I don't have a backlog. I've been waiting to bring on. Yeah, someday. Need this. I got nothing of that. I'm not a Bible scholar that has this, big backlog of stuff. I just don't. I've been in church for a long time, and I know a few things, but most part I learn as I go. I'm making this stuff up. Just precept upon precept, line upon line. I'm like, it just seems to come as I read the book. And those patterns, I've been telling you, look for patterns. God repeating himself, God emphasizing, doing something strange, something that doesn't, patience. Those are the things I'm looking for. So in chapter 3, I'm reading context, Judgment of Nations, chapter 3, Judgment of Nations. And my mind went over to Matthew chapter 25 because that's the New Testament description of the Judgment of Nations. And I started doing comparisons between the two passages, and I'm literally trying to picture the movie. Think about what you talk about the Judgment of Nations. Think about the Judgment of Nations. This is a real thing that's going to really happen in a real place with real people. And I try to visualize these things because I'm a visual guy. And so I'm picturing it like a movie. And I'll read these two verses here. This is Joel chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations, and I will bring them down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. Phrase, I will also gather. That's not the phrase. He's gathering Israel, and he's gathering other nations. Israel's there. It's Israel. He's gathering all the other nations. That's where I go, hey, that sounds like Matthew 25. I'm just giving my little Bible study moment. Like, there I am over in Matthew 25 now. Because this will give some context to what's going on. It'll help us make that picture in our mind about what's going on. So look over in Matthew 21. I probably read this a couple times in the last month. But in verse 31, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory and all his holy angels with him. from the goats, and you shall set the sheep on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come ye, blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was an hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee an hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Then shall he say unto them on the left, Depart from me, ye everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was an hungered, and you gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you took me not in, naked, and you clothed me not, sick and in prison, and you visited me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Lord, when saw you or naked or sick or in prison and did minister? Then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you did it not to one of the least of these, you did it not to me. And these shall go into everlasting punishment, but the righteous unto life eternal. My mind, multitude of people gathered in a valley, that Valley of Jehoshaphat. If that doesn't make you ask yourself, where's the people from the rest of the world? I don't know. I mean, where's the Americans and the Chinese and the Russians? I mean, how do they get there? This valley is in Israel, and there's no other people. So I'm just saying, maybe not a lot of them made it. I don't know. I don't get it. But it's a physical place. This is a physical, as Joe is alluding to, this is a physical place. There's a physical judgment and a physical punishment during the tribulation. It's a great picture of a spiritual punishment, not spiritual judgment that we're going to go through. My guess is they didn't make it. I don't know. Your friends and relatives. That's what I'm talking about. Your friends and relatives and aren't saved. They didn't make it. But they're gathered. You got God's remnant and the remnant of all other nations at this judgment of nations after the tribulation period, gathered in one place in a valley just outside of Jerusalem. One side of Jerusalem. I've seen it when it's pretty big and it's pretty wide. It's going to hold a lot of, but could be people it's going to hold. And the interesting thing about being in a valley is you are not in a tactically good position. You can't fight a battle from the valley up. That's what the hard. Sometimes you have to. If you want to fight, you want the higher ground. And we have that song, "Higher Ground," right? These people are it's the end. This is where David fought Goliath. This is the same valley. A lot of history goes on in this valley. You got this long plain where Tel Aviv is, and this long plain up into the mountains, and you get to the peak of the mountains, you get just over the peak of the mountains, down a little bit, there's Jerusalem on a plain, then there's this big valley that goes, and on the other side of the valley is Jordan, which is and grant that Israel gave them, right? So you had David and the armies on the western slope, and you had Goliath and the enemies of God on the eastern slope, and now we've got everybody that's left in the middle of this valley. You're in a battle. You want that higher ground for sure. Nobody would take up a tactical position and say, okay, I'm going to defend the valley and just the heights, right? You hear in the news all the time about Israel and the Golan Heights, right? The Golan 67 5-day war from, I think it was from Jordan, and come back, and Israel, you give up our tactical, this is where they attacked us from, and we managed to fight them off because God was with them. Anyways, in the most vulnerable position you can be in when it comes to a battle, being in the valley is vulnerable. You can be attacked on all sides. And in the book of Joel, there are only two groups of people left, Israel and everybody else. There's no church. You're either God's people or you're not. And in Matthew 25, there's two groups of people here and everybody else, because the church has been gone. The Holy first time anything like God showing up is right here in Matthew 25, right after, and they're all about to get it. And the entire place, this valley there is called Fat. I believe it says that in chapter 2, the valley, chapter 3, verse 2, the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead them for them. Describing that judgment seat of the judgment of nations, which we won't go to. We're not part of it, but we can learn from it, because I think Joe was alluding to it. I think it's a physical picture, spiritual, that we're going to get through this scot-free, just going, I'm a Christian, you can't touch me. I'm like, no, I don't think that's true. The spiritual principle with us as the church in the New Testament. But there's 3 key phrases that, and this is not the phrase that hit me. Look at verse 2. And I will gather all nations and will bring them down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. And you see, there is my people, my heritage, and my land. Verse 3. And they have cast lots for my people and have given a boy for an harlot and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. Pretty bad. It's not as bad as it is today, but it's pretty bad. They cast lots for my people. God's enemies have been seen throughout these prophetic books as being merchants, right? Remember when the merchants show up and they treat God's people like commodities, to be sold, to be used, to be abused, to be mocked, to be ridiculed, to be killed, slaughtered for entertainment. That's why they had a lion's den in the book of Daniel. Why do you think they had a lion's den? That was for entertainment. That's where do you think the Romans got it when they would put Christians in the Colosseum and have lions eat them? I mean, it's an age-old thing. It's not new. We were used as entertainment. God's people were used as entertainment. And God's people are not supposed to be treated like common merchandise on the market. And here's God making note that his people were being treated like commodities here. And he's not going to be happy. Like, maybe even they were food. I mean, who knows what these devil worshippers were doing, right? You don't know. But they've been in captivity now for 250 years, and then going through this tribulation period for 7 years, which is even worse than the captivity, because there's no one holding them back. You know, this is God coming back and saying, you see God like, wait a minute, God, didn't you want this to happen? Talk about your own family sometimes. You might say something and you hear someone else say something about your family. You're like, hey, wait a minute. Talk about my family that way. Like, I can say that, but you can't. Well, God can say. And he's saying, you know what? You know, I can do these things, but I didn't make you want to do these things to these people. And it was already in your heart to do it. And it affects God, I think, the same way. It affects him to complain about his people. I mean, he's earned the right. I don't think any one of us have. But in the book of Hebrews, in chapter 11, Paul writes about God's people that God sent and how the world treated them. In chapter 11, 36, it says, and others had trial, cruel mockings and scourging. Moreover, of bonds and imprisonment, they were stoned, they were sawn asunder, they were tempted, they were slain with a sword, they wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented. The people that did this to the prophets went just a little bit further than talking trash about God's family. What would you or I do to someone? There was an article this week about a father that found out that someone had and sold her for $1,000 in sex trafficking. He, in the trunk of his own car, drove the car off in the neighborhood, dropped it. After a couple of months, when the people stealing things from the car couldn't stand the smell anymore, they called the police and found his body in the trunk. I'm like, yeah, he's going to go to jail. I think he should get a medal. But God had those people in the valley right next to God's people in this valley, and power in their position. There's no more history to be played out. Chances, that's it. They're in the valley, and it's about to happen. And that's my people. It says, my heritage. What is a heritage? My heritage. You look at heritage, and what you think about is custom, our ancestors, and our family traditions, and the things that we pass down to our kids. I mean, that's all true. But the first mention of the word heritage is in Exodus chapter 6, verse 8, where God's literally talking about the land that he swore to Abraham, and he calls it an heritage. The land is a heritage. Israel is an heritage. For they are the rejoicing of the heart. Testimonies are a heritage. The land, testimonies. In Psalms 1, heritage, he's talking about his land, his people, his children, his statutes, his testimonies. He's bigger, not just his people. Anytime all those goats had tribulation, they had someone lit them up at least once. If they were alive and made it through the tribulation, they had an opportunity to not take the mark of the beast and to help Israel. They all had that opportunity, and they chose either to do it or not. Most of them chose not to. Like this all the time. Oh, my land. And I never understood what that meant. Oh, my land. I wish I would have asked her why she said that. But what does God mean? To the land grant that they're supposed to have. Your feet shall not. Land grant is not just Israel, but it's Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, a lot of Egypt, a lot of Turkey, a lot of Greece, a lot of Iraq, and that little strip of dirt. And it turns out there's more than rocks in the rest of that area. Israel just settled on the rocky part. Lebanon's used to have forests, but it's been deforested, so there's nothing left really. The cedars of Lebanon are really no more. But they were supposed to take over that entire land grant, but they didn't. Now here in chapter 3, at the end of this book, the entire course of human history has run. There's no more human history. It's over. It's right here. And God's basically saying something for Joel 3, verse. And what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will ye render me a recompense? And if you recompense me, swiftly and speedily will I return your recompense upon your own head. He's like, what you got now? Like, what do you got? You got something left? We've been going at it for 6,000 years now. What you got? And I'm right here. He's like, he said, you're going to do something, you're just going to stand there and bleed because it's over. I mean, everybody knows Joseph. He'll understand. No, he won't understand perfectly. He understands exactly. He's around a corner and sees. You see somebody picking on your sister. I saw some guy picking on my sister once. I was beating him when his mom came and dragged me off of him. I mean, I was still beating him. I could hear her coming. I'm like, I'm not. I was sitting on it, just hounding him. Like, I didn't even get in any trouble. That's part of it. They called the cops and everything. I'm like, you was beating up my sister. The cop goes, family goes, you can't control this kid, and he will. That was great. Back in the day, man. This is like 70 or something. I don't know. Back in the day when you could be a kid and get away with it. Amen. But he said, yeah. 2 tombstones, no extra charge, right there. Now remember, he's a captive audience, literally a captive audience. Israel's been captive for, in the context of Joel, in the time frame in history, they've been captive for up to 250 years. Picture of the tribulation. In history, and at the end, and in terms of the judgment of nations, this is after the tribulation. So there's double context going on here. They're in this vulnerable tactical position on the very land where they held Israel. Land, they destroyed the temple, they took down the walls, they held kegger parties in there using the cups and vessels from the temple to do beer bongs with, and all the things that the stay away from it and kind of not deal with it, but now it's just outright mocking. It's like, it's hard to watch. They're having tailgate parties, opening day season. I mean, I love these. Black powder season, opening day for rifle season, turkey season, duck season, whatever really necessary thing gets them, whatever necessary thing that comes along, because God wants me out there communing with the, with, I don't know. I can buy a duck at a grocery store. I can buy anything. My carried in your temples, my goodly things, the children of Jerusalem, that you might remove them far from their border. He's saying this. I know what you gold. What's silver? What's gold? It's a picture of Christ. It's the Christ. It's God's deity. We've taken God's deity and said, nah, you can get around. And if he is a God, surely he'll be just like us. Well, talks about that too. But surely he'll understand. No, he won't. I mean, he does. I mean, I think that would be your best bet, is if that God understands. Because he fully understands what we did. And it's not going to. They mocked the redemption of God. They reduced his deity to a vessel to carry their grog while they partied their life away. I mean, remember when Darius brought vessels in to the party? Didn't like that very much. That silver and that gold, they were sanctified and set aside for a holy purpose of God, and they took them and used it to defend themselves with. And that's kind of what people do. We take the eternal security, the salvation, redemption that God, the gold, gave us, of how God. Because this judgment that's about to happen is exactly physically what spiritually we're going to go through at our judgment. I'm convinced of. And we could say, I mean, when I start reading the Bible, man, these are stupid. Don't they see? Like, God said, don't do it. Then they don't touch the. Like, really? I mean, I do it. Hey, waitress says, I'm like, really? All right. But they just, and then as I grew up, I realized, wait a minute, I'm doing this, I'm just not doing them in the same period, and I'm doing them in a different context, but I'm doing them. I don't get too bummed out. The big brother, I was talking about his little brothers and sisters, and brother deserved the beating he was getting from the bully, because little brother had a mouth. I mean, I don't know what was going on with that guy hitting my sister. I didn't really care much. I just wanted to beat him up, so I did. But, maybe she mouthed off to him. She didn't deserve it. But we deserve the things that we're getting from the world because we set it up ourselves. That's God's kid. He's like, I'll mess with them. I'll correct them. I know what's good for them. You don't. I'm going to do this. You're not. And he says in verse 6 that you might remove them far from the border. The world's trying to get us out of borders and sell us to the Grecians. Figuratively, they want to get us out of our borders. There's some metaphor here. Getting the Jews out of the land would somehow legitimize these people taking over the land. So God allowed them to come in and take them captive. But why didn't they keep them captive in Jerusalem? They wanted them out of there so they could be the legitimate owners of that point in space. It gave them legitimacy to keep them out so they could legitimize them taking the land. They could delegitimize the Jews by getting the Jews purpose. Doing that to us, they're trying to get us out of our borders, out of our place, there with them so they can feel good about what they're doing. And it legitimizes them while it delegitimizes us. They have a holy ground and sell us to the Grecians, the world, so they can get us down in that of the shadow of death. That's where they want us. They want us not higher ground. They want us down in the valley with them. Mel Sabaka's had that sermon, how can you soar with eagles when you hang around with turkeys all the time? Like, I remember hearing the first time, it was like 1997. I'm like, man, what a great picture that is. Like, he went on to say, Turkeys can't fly. They'll never fly. But an eagle can walk around and pick food off the ground like a turkey. I just thought that was a good metaphor for me. When we do this, when we leave our higher ground, we legitimize the world. Because same places they go, we do the same things they do, we act the same way they do. We legitimize and we delegitimize ourselves because we're doing the same things the world's doing. But God's going to put them back where they belong. 7. Behold, I will place where they have pants upon your head. So there's good news in it. Dad's coming home. He's going to be mad, but he's going to clean up the mess. So he's coming back, but there's going to be, that whooping coming. There's going to be that wood that's going to happen. And here's the phrase that stuck in my head. Here it comes, verse 11 through 14. Assemble yourselves and come down together round about thither. Cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be wakened and come to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full, the vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. Wait a minute. What did God just do there? He just changed, and he changed a pattern all in the same place. And that just stuck in my brain all week long. This, and I know I'm spiritualize that and say, you're going to come to the valley of decision one day and you're going to have to choose God or choose the world. And like, that's not going to happen here. There's no decisions made in the valley of decision. Valley of decision there, like you already made your decision. You already had a chance. There's no more chance. Nobody's going to get saved in the valley of decision. The decision has been made. The history has been written. The end has already been decided at this time. But this thing had all the hallmarks of God trying to get my attention. I'm like, I was like, what am I going to? I'm like, by the time I got to chapter 3, I'm like, oh man, I'm almost at verse coming along, and I got nothing for Sunday. And there it was, just neon lights. It just, and that's the one that got me. Oh, Jehoshaphat, you remember, God has judged, not God will judge. God has judged, past tense. He's calling it the valley of decision. God made his decided what was going to happen before it ever started. God already decided. He told everybody what was going to happen. I'm going to send you into captivity. I'm going to allow these nations to do it. And when it's over, I'm going to kick the snot out of those. Decided all. Forming them now. This is that point. He's like, remember, that day is coming. Here it is. And he told us the same thing about the judgment seat of Christ. That day is coming. It's going to come. It's going to come, and we're going to think about it, but not because we don't want to think about it. These people had given much thought. There's 2 people there, and one of them is larger than the other. And the smaller group is the world. The smaller group is God's people. But even that group was bigger before the tribulation started. Well, so it's hard to explain. So some of the Jews during the tribulation simply die because they're killed. Some of the Jews take the mark, so they're in the goat side. They're not God's people anymore. So they're down there, and God has called this place, God has judged past tense, and now he's calling it the valley of decision. They've made their decisions one way or the other, and now they're going to find out what's going to go on because God already made his decision. And God's people and God's enemies have made a lot of decisions, but none of those decisions are made here. That's the thing about free will. Given this free will, and we do. And we make them over and over again. It's been like this since the beginning of time. People make decisions and come to a place called God has judged. And all the decisions we've made come to fruition, and we get a reward for that, whether it be good or the judgment seat of Christ. God has judged. Doesn't already know. You think I used to think we'd get to the judgment seat of Christ and it would play out before. He's got enough memory in his computer banks to remember all that stuff and sort it all out. Here it is. Told you this day was coming. I even told you. But here's the crime. Come on in. Like, I think it's going to be terrible. I don't mean, is it 7 years of torture? No, but I think it's worse. I just think it's going to be worse. This is God here in this book judging the nations, but it's a great picture for me of the judgment seat of Christ. We'll all be in this valley called the Valley of Decision, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. We're not going to make any decisions at the judgment seat of Christ. We already made our decisions day after day after day that led us up to that last breath that we took in, because that's the last thing we're going to do is exhale. And then right after that, there's no more decisions at the judgment seat of Christ. You don't get to change anything. You might wish you could make a decision. Like a rat. It's just a leaf going. Like, that's scary. It's as big as a car. You're not going to get to make any decisions. By the time we show up in eternity, whether we were resurrected or whether we were taken up in the rapture, all the decisions that we have ever made based on our own flesh have already been made. There's no more decisions to make. I've said that a lot. We don't get to make one when we show up at our Valley of Jehoshaphat. God has judged already. We show up at the Valley of Decision to reap the rewards of the decisions that we've made. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done, whether it be good or bad. Knowing, therefore, the terror of the Lord, we pursue, and I also are made manifest in your conscience for us. Now for us. And we could have said, easy for us. He made it hard for the Jews. I mean, maybe if he understood anyone, it's hard for them. Christian, it's easy. One of the decisions that God made, that he wrote down, is this judgment of nations. And that, for me, is a physical picture of the spiritual judgment that we're going to go through at the judgment seat of Christ. The Lord shall also roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake. But the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. Bad physical things are happening to these people in the tribulation. And then they're going to come to a judgment. And I can't help but think bad spiritual things are going to happen to us when we get to that judgment too. He'll be back on his throne. Yes, because I don't have a concept of what a king is. America doesn't have a king. King or a bad king, the king gets his way. King, it's good to be king. It's good to be king. And no matter what, we lucked out to get a good, we don't obey. But he still gets his way. King's patience. Insist on types in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10. We say it isn't literal, or he doesn't mean what it says, so we're safe and everyone gets a do-over because people understand. Is it God understands? And you'll say, yeah, I know why you did it. No, I know exactly. Or maybe we just believe that God's like, earthly fathers. He's up there on his throne counting to 3. 1, 2, 3. Like, I can just see us just giving him the middle finger. Saying, what? The kids ever go 4 on you? Mine never did. They never did. They were good kids. They were good kids. 4. I would love to see a kid turn to his dad and go. Like, anyways. If God's up there doing that stuff, then either God's prophets and the writers of the Bible wasted a lot of time, or the New York Times was right when they put the headline out there that said God is dead. He spent an awful lot of time and energy and human capital, right? Including the death of his own son, himself on the cross, to get our attention. And we think we're just going to go get up there and he'll go, oh, never mind. That's cool. You're good. I just don't see that as being the case. And if that was the case, then God couldn't be holy, because God can't lie. And if God said it was going to happen and it didn't, that's a lie, right? I just think there's something to this thing. I mean, I don't think I have a handle on the whole thing, and anyone that tells you they do, don't. But there's just something about with God that somehow, some way, we're supposed to be doing something so that we might be worthy to do something some other time. And all these stories in the Old Testament, I can't say it enough, they are physical pictures of spiritual principles. And you got to be careful, because they don't all apply 100% each time every way, but something in there that our pea brains can grasp, and the patterns that God sets forth about these valleys of Jehoshaphat. God is judging. Transport them to another valley. Just change the name of the valley. There's a decision that's been made. He's not looking for any decision. You can read the rest of that chapter. It makes a decision. They're in that valley. They're in a vulnerable position. They're being judged. All the nations are there. Maybe God went poof and they're there. So maybe there are Americans at the end of that 7 years is going to get judged. And the nations that helped Israel and the people within those nations helped Israel get through that tribulation and didn't take the mark of the beast. And the rest of them are goats. All of the goats go to hell. All of the sheep don't. But we all have the same destiny, no matter if we're Jews or Gentiles or whatever. We're after this, the judgment, and it's coming. Hebrews 9:27, it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this, the judgment. There's no way around it. After this, the judgment. Okay. So what kind of decisions are we making now? What are we doing with our time? What's the basis for the decisions that we make? Is it our flesh or God? I mean, if we made all of our decisions, would our life be worse? Or would it to feed our own flesh? Do we think that, well, I made so many of them, I can't possibly remember. That's how we think. We think about how we get of our employer. There's no decision. There's no way they can catch the time I waste at work. There's no way that if I didn't want Lorinda to see my internet history, there's no way she'd see it. Like, the good point is I don't care. Like, she's got all my passwords. I've got all her. But think about it. If you wanted to get away with stuff, you can get away with it. What's the outcome of those decisions? Did the decision further God's plan or not? It's as simple as that. I always balance there, read a book every once in a while. I'm like, okay, boy, I can take that little grain of truth and turn it into well, why do I need to be in church? Why do I need the Bible? Why do I need to outline? Why do I need to anything? I can justify any decision that I make right now. And if I base it on what my dad found out about, he didn't know anything. He never caught me doing anything. I told him stuff, and he's like, yeah, what do you think I was doing? Like, what do you think I was hanging out with? Huh? Yeah. Why were you hiding the popsicle? The fudge stick. Popsicles I don't care about. Oh, I'm known at work as a guy. So I worked for this guy before. And when I got there, people were already using a phrase that I introduced to my boss: plan the work and work the plan. I'm known as that. Plan the work and work the plan. He told people about me that knew that. Believers, you plan first and then you work. Plan can be adjusted, but not having a plan. And he wrote it down. He planned the work, now we work the plan. And it's easy for us to deviate from it, but it's not easy to deny when we're not working God's plan. And these are the decisions. These are the that we made. So we made a decision to work God's plan, and we made a decision to not work God's plan. All of our decisions are made before we show up at the judgment of Christ. He laid it all out for us so we could read it. We could get on board and work that plan. And the decisions we make either further that plan or hurt it. There's no neutral decisions. My decision to not study my Bible does not do nothing to God's plan. It hurts God's plan. My decision to not be where I'm supposed to be and do what I'm supposed to do is the owner's plan. I'm working against the owner's plan. There's no neutrality in there. There's either I'm either fully dedicated to my job or I'm not. I'm fully dedicated to my family or I'm not. I'm fully dedicated to church or I'm not. There's no in between there. Ironic part, his plan gets achieved anyways because he didn't need me. But he wrote out a liquidated damages clause. And if you don't perform these and you don't perform those, then these are the penalties. And I used to see those all the time. I used to pay those all the time a couple jobs ago. But he laid it out in 6th grade English so we could all digest it. So when time comes for our annual review, there's no way to plead ignorance. I mean, come on, we all know it. We all know when we make a decision that isn't part of God's plan. You think about those decisions you make with your time, your job, your finances, your kids, your families, your church. If Jesus Christ was sitting right there when we made those decisions, would we have changed the decisions that we made? Well, I'm sorry. Doesn't Jesus Christ live inside of us? How is it? What do we really believe? Do we really believe this garbage called Christianity or not? I mean, do we believe it? We don't act like it. And you know why? Because he'll understand. Yes, he will. And boy, are you in trouble. Boy, are we in trouble. What? Now, if we all answered the question that I just asked honestly, we would all say this: I don't care if Jesus is there or not. I'm going to do what I want. Because if we all believe this Christianity thing, we absolutely know that Jesus Christ was there when we made that decision. Isn't that weird? If I was in the room, would you make a different decision? If your friends were in the room, would you make a different decision? Probably. But Jesus Christ sitting there next to you in the room when you made that decision, you still made that decision, there's soul searching we should probably all do. He's in us, watching us, listening to us make these decisions, seeing into our hearts when we make those decisions. So maybe we just lied to ourselves and said we'd make better decisions if he were in the room, right? I don't know. John 14:20 says, at that day ye shall know that I am in my Father, and ye in me, and I in you. Jesus is in the room when you make the decision. 1 Corinthians 3:16, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. He was in the room when you made that decision. And we think that that'll never come up again. Sorry, God. Really? But you said sorry before. It's like, wait. Sorry, God, each time. Were you lying? I think it's going to be like that. This will be a short one. We should all know this. I think we know. Travel through this life, we're going to wind up in a valley called Jehoshaphat, where God has judged. And it's a valley of decisions. Maybe it's a hole that we dug for ourselves by those decisions. Maybe that valley's a hole that we dug. I mean, there might be some metaphor in there that this valley is the hole we dug in. I know I've been out there with a backhoe digging my hole. I don't know about you. I got more problems than any of you. So, I mean, I'm not going to stand up here some holier than thou guy that you all know who I am. But we're going to wind up at that place that God has judged. And we're going to give an account for what we've done, whether it be good or bad. What did we do with our kids? We give our job, did we give our bosses more of our time than we gave God? Now, I mean, and that's a tough thing because, you got to work for a living. I get that. But did you honor your boss more than you honored God? Yes or no? God will know. It's not a lie. I mean, he was there when you did it. So, I mean, it's going to be tough. We'll wind up in that valley of decision, a place where we will see the fruit of our decisions. We will reap the benefit of the decisions that we made in that valley of decision. We will not be making decisions. There's no more decisions to be made. There's no more choices. We run out of choices at the judgment seat of Christ. There's no more choices after that. The choice is over. And the outcome is entirely in our hands. And the question that we should all leave here today is, now that we, I think we all knew that before we were here, but we know it now. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to change the decisions that we make? What are we going to do with our time, talent, and treasure? I mean, there's a lot of things I'd want to do. One of them this morning was to stay in bed longer. I don't know why. They gave me an extra hour of sleep and it messed me up. I'm like, this is the day of the year that I like the least. 5:11, sunset, 5:11. That's just so depressing. But my decision almost a year ago was to be here today. Almost a year ago was to be here today, to spend more time in the Bible, to spend more time with God, to do more studying, to dedicate more of my decision making to doing God's plan instead of Bob's plan. And have I been perfect about it? No. Could this message have been better? Yeah. Will the next one be better? No. But could it be? Yeah. I mean, the decisions I make with my time affect what I'm doing for God. So when I want to do something else instead of being at church, or instead of studying God's word, or instead of reading my Bible, or instead of something that God wants me to do, it's going to show up again at this valley of decision when we find out what we don't get, those rewards, what we don't get, what we could have had. Imagine this. Someone gave you a lottery ticket and you said, I don't want to hear. Nobody wins that. And they win that, $500 million. Imagine how you feel about that. Oh, it's just money, Bobby. Yeah, you just lied to yourself. I want that money. And yes, it would change me. Oh, if I won the lottery, it'd change me a lot. It'd change me a whole lot. But I would certainly have a few regrets about handing that lottery ticket to somebody. I'd have regrets being the guy that sold them that lottery ticket. I get mad when someone wins the lottery. I have this anger that rises up in me. I'm like, bleh. Anyway, let's just pray and we'll be out of here. Father, we just thank you again for allowing us to come here and open up your word today. Lord, I pray that we be thinking about the future, and not just the future of our life, but eternity, and paying attention to the decisions that we make today, because they affect our destiny forever. Every decision that we make will decide what we do and what we get and who we are in your eyes. And when we make these decisions, Lord, let us know that, let us remember and believe that you're in the room with us while we make them, and that you will remember and you will recompense and you will gather us together, and we will be at this judgment seat of Christ just as surely as Israel and the nations will be in that Valley of Jehoshaphat. And they don't have a second chance. There's no more second chances after that. So Lord, let us spend our time wisely. Let us change the things about our life that we know that you want us to change. And let's see how the fruit develops out of that. See if that's not a better deal for us right now, Lord. Bring us all back together on Wednesday. Let's all have a good week at work and keep us all healthy and safe. And pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.